Rome, 94 BC. You are 6 years old. The house smells like old marble and older debt. Your family name is ancient, Julius Caesar. Respected, recognized, completely broke. The name opens doors, but there is no gold behind them anymore. The name is the inheritance. You live in the Subura, the wrong side of Rome. Loud, overcrowded, dangerous after dark. From the upstairs window, you watch senators pass below in their litters. White togas, soft hands, rings on every finger. Men carried through the city like Rome was built to move around them. You are 6 years old and you already understand one thing. A name without power is just noise. At 18, your name becomes dangerous. Sulla has seized Rome. He is writing lists now, names on parchment that become death warrants by morning. Your family backed the wrong side, and Sulla remembers. His men strip your priesthood. They take your wife Cornelia's dowry. They want every future attached to your name. Then comes the order. Divorce Cornelia. You refuse. There is no speech, no dramatic stand, just a decision made by a young man too proud to bend. So you leave before the soldiers arrive. You run north through frozen fields. You sleep in barns. You bribe guards with borrowed coins. Fever pins you down for a week in a stranger's house. You burn, you shiver. You listen for boots outside the door. But Rome does not find you. Sulla dies in his bed like an old man. Rome exhales. You are still breathing. He never found you. First lesson: survival is a skill, and you are already good at it. At 25, the Aegean is flat and silver at dawn. Then the shouting starts. Cilician pirates board before anyone can react. Blades flash over the rail. You are dragged below deck, chained, and given a price. 20 talents of silver. You look at the man holding the chain and laugh in his face. 20? You are worth at least 50. He thinks captivity has made you delirious. It has not. You spend 38 days on that ship. You recite poetry at dinner. You demand silence when you want to sleep. Every evening, calmly, without raising your voice, you tell them exactly what you will do when you are free. You will return. You will find them. You will punish them. They find it funny. That is their mistake. The ransom arrives. You step off the ship into the sunlight. Then you hire vessels, hunt them down island by island, and keep your promise. You told them you would. You always mean what you say. At 32, Spain is dry, quiet, and not Rome. You govern a minor province at the edge of the world, settling land disputes for men who will never remember your name. Then, in the Forum of Gades, you see him. Alexander. Cold marble. Young face. He was your age when he died. By then, he had already crossed the known world. You stand there in the afternoon heat. Your chest tightens. Your eyes go wet. You do not wipe them. This is not admiration. It is humiliation. That night, you walk to your tent and write your resignation by lamplight. You leave for Rome. You have wasted enough time standing at the edge of a world that still has a center you have not touched. By 37, debt becomes your engine. Rome runs on favors, and you are spending them faster than anyone. You borrow enormous amounts from Marcus Crassus, the richest man in the Republic. You throw public games for days. You fill arenas with gladiators.
You flood the streets with free grain until the crowd screams your name loud enough to shake the columns above the Senate steps. Every coin buys a vote. Every vote buys an office. Every office opens the next door. Creditors pace outside your house at dawn. The pressure is immense. You use it as fuel. You win the office of Pontifex Maximus through shameless bribery. The old senators are disgusted. You do not care. Their disgust is not power. The machine keeps moving. By 40, you understand the truth. You cannot take Rome alone. So you sit down with Pompey the Great and Marcus Crassus. Pompey has the armies. Crassus has the money. You have the crowd, the hunger, and the plan neither of them can see far enough to make. 3 men, no contract, no witnesses, no friendship. Just a quiet agreement between people who understand what the Republic has become. History will call it the First Triumvirate. For you, it is simpler. Pompey gets what he wants, Crassus gets what he wants, and you get what you need. A military command, a province, legions.
Past the Alps, entire nations have barely heard the word Rome. That is about to change. At 42, you leave Rome. You do not return for 8 years. Your men march 20 miles a day through forests, swamps, rivers, and mountains that do not exist on any Roman map. You build a bridge across the Rhine in 10 days. You cross the Gray Sea into Britannia just to prove distance is not protection. Tribe after tribe, winter after winter. You eat what your soldiers eat. You sleep near them. You move faster than your enemies think possible. Then Vercingetorix unites Gaul against you. In 52 BC at Alesia, you are trapped between 2 dangers: an enemy inside the walls, another army outside them. So you build walls around his walls, then more walls behind you. 1 ring to trap him, 1 ring to protect yourself. You turn siege into engineering. You turn hunger into a weapon. Eventually, Vercingetorix rides out, his armor still shining. He lays his weapons at your feet without a word. Gaul is Rome. You do not write it as slaughter. You write it as necessity. Clean Latin, clean sentences. If history is going to judge you, it will first have to read your version. Then comes the Rubicon. January 49 BC. 1 river, knee-deep. Unremarkable. Cross with your army and you are a criminal. Disband your army and walk into Rome alone, and Pompey will finish you within a season. The Senate built this trap specifically for you, because now they understand exactly what you are. Cold water fills your boots. You look at the far bank. 1 legion stands behind you, silent. Then you say it. Alia iacta est. The die is cast. 1 step, then another. The whole army follows without a word. You have never turned back from anything in your life. Tonight is not when that changes. At 52, Pompey runs. Italy to Greece, Greece to Egypt, collecting broken armies and desperate allies at every stop. You follow. At Pharsalus, you destroy his army with fewer men. Pompey flees to Egypt. Before you even land, a sealed wooden box is waiting at the dock. You open it yourself. Inside is the end of the man who married your daughter, Rome's greatest general, your rival, your warning. You close the box. You turn away so your officers cannot see your face. He deserved better than this. In Egypt, you place Cleopatra on a throne that was already collapsing without you. Then you move east to crush the last holdouts at Zila. It takes 4 hours. You send 3 words back to Rome. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Everything fits inside those 3 words. By 55, Rome gives you everything. Dictator for life. Your face on coins from Spain to Syria. Your chair above other men. Your reforms reshaping the calendar itself. Soon even time will carry your name. July, carved into history. You receive senators in the ivory chair. You do not stand when they enter. That is the mistake, not the power, the way you wear it. Men who feared you are turning colder, quieter, more patient. Gaius Cassius watches you differently now. Even Brutus, the man you pardoned, the man you treated like a son, no longer looks at you the same way. Your body is failing too. The falling sickness drops you mid-step in public without warning. You get up every time. One more campaign, one more reform, one more step. Always forward. You never learned any other way. March 15th, 44 BC. Calpurnia grips your arm at the door. She dreamed the roof collapsed and you bled on the marble beneath it. A soothsayer on the road gives the same warning he has given for weeks. Beware the Ides of March. Near the Forum, someone presses a note into your hand. You close your fist around it. You do not read it. The Senate Hall fills with white togas. Men you pardoned, men you promoted, men who drank at your table last winter. They crowd around you with a petition. Too close. Too many. Too arranged. The first blade catches your shoulder. You grab the arm. The second comes, then the third. The marble is cold against your cheek. Through the noise and the closing dark, you find Brutus standing over you with the blade still in his hand. You look at him for a long moment. Then you pull your toga over your face. One final act of control. If they're going to watch you fall, they will not have your eyes. It started with a boy at a window in the Subura, watching senators pass below. A child with an ancient name and no power. It ends here. Cold marble, white togas, the men you trusted most holding the knives. You built the world that killed you. And now, you are history.